Right, so today I want to talk about a study done by the Pew Research Center back in 2016, and its title is In the Political Correctness Debate, Most Americans Think People Are Too Easily Offended. And this is, honestly, I would say that this has gone a little further, considering it's actually almost exactly, a little over 3 years even now, which seems like a lot, but I'll get into the numbers here. Um, Okay, so it starts out by saying that at a time when the appropriateness of language has become a political issue, most Americans, 59% say too many people are easily offended these days over language. 39% say people need to be more careful about the language they use to avoid offending people with different backgrounds. So, and this is something that I think is the opposite in that there's a very big silent majority in this. I don't know if you want to say debate, but let's just put it that way. That the left and especially the far left really, really makes their voice heard. Partially because I think they make up a larger percent of the population than they actually do, so they think that they're representing a much larger percent of the population than they actually are, so that justifies them in that. And partially, people on the right are afraid to be called racist, sexist, whatever name the left is calling them nowadays, so they don't speak up. And the left, in their moral self-righteousness, always, talks, speaks much louder. So, getting into the numbers here, total, obviously 59% say people are too easily offended, 39% say they need to be careful with language. So an overwhelming majority of people say that people are too easily offended. Among Republicans, it's 78 to 21. In Democrats, it's the complete opposite direction. And 37% of Democrats say people are too easily offended, compared to 78% of Republicans. And then 61% say Democrats say people need to be more careful. 21% of Republicans. Independents line up very closely with Republicans, so I think it's just another example of the Democrats and the modern left going off the deep end, in that 68% of independents say people are too easily offended, compared to 78% of Republicans, and 32% of independents say people need to be more careful with their language, compared to 21% of Republicans. So they line up pretty close. Probably a good 80 to 90% of the overlap is with Republicans, and like 10 or 20s with Democrats. 83% of Trump supporters, so even more than the average Republican, say people are too easily offended. So I think that's another compliment to Trump supporters. Not that, like, I'm a small Trump supporter. I think he's done a lot of stuff wrong, but I still think he's a lot better than any alternatives. Clinton supporters, 59% say people need to be more careful. So even among Clinton supporters, the average Democrat is even to the left of Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton's pretty far to the left. I can't think of too many policies that, aside from full-on socialism, that she didn't support. So let's go over the rest of this article here. They go into some race and gender-specific categories here. Men, 9% more likely to say people are too easily offended. Women, 8% less likely, which again, I think it goes to show that if you're a big supporter of free speech, then criticizing white men and pushing back on this, men are horrible for this reason, that reason, whatever other reason, you really need to push back on that, because it's women who are the ones that are more against free speech, and it's men, especially white men, who are pro-free speech. So if you support free speech, then you better be talking about this stuff. 67% of whites, again, so 8% higher than the average, again. So if you're attacking, you should be defending whites if you support free speech, but a lot of people aren't. Blacks, 30% say people are too easily offended. 67% say people need to be more careful. And I think this is partially due to the fact that lower IQ populations tend to not be as supportive of free speech, and partially because blacks have been bombarded with biased media reporting basically that, blacks are victims, racism this, racism that. So I don't think I don't think that's a necessarily representation of blacks. If they were given a fair worldview, I think that number would come back a little bit, but it definitely wouldn't come back a lot. And then Hispanics, 47% compared to 49% who say people need to be more careful. So again, Hispanics a lot less likely to support free speech than whites. So again, like people, it just boggles my mind that the extent people are willing to go to not be called racist it's beyond me. And you look at the likelihood of people based on age to say that too many people are too easily offended. It's kind of a bell curve, in that the younger you are, the less likely you are to support it, and then the older you get, the less likely you are to support it. So the most likely age demographic to support the idea that people are too easily offended, or in other words, free speech, I think is a comparable alternative way to put that, is 30 to 49. The lowest is actually 65 and over. So as far as education goes, it doesn't change a whole lot based off education levels, which I think is a testament to just how bad colleges are, or universities are, in their level of bias, in that people with a high school degree, or not even a high school degree, 56% of them say that people are too easily offended, compared to people that are college graduates, 61%, post-grad 57%, and then some college 63%. So there's almost no difference. So I think people have this idea that people with college degrees are smarter, which they are, but it's because they tend to be smarter to begin with, not because the college degree makes them smarter. So that's an interesting poll when it comes to that. As far as the age breakdown goes, as far as dividing it between Republicans and Democrats, you have it here. Among Republicans, the least likely to do it, I guess, would be your 65 and over. Just 28% say people need to be more careful with their language. That goes the same for people with high school or less education. The most likely to say that people are too easily offended are Republicans aged 30 to 49, and then postgraduates that are Republicans. Those are the two most likely groups. Among Democrats, the most likely to say that people are people need to be more careful with the language they say would be, it's looking like you got actually a tie, 65 and older, post-grad, and college grad. And that's something that really, I think it's another thorn in the whole, the idea that colleges are really biased to the left, and that this really, I think, shows that the higher your education level, when you're on the left, the more likely you are to say people need to be more careful with their language, which completely proves the idea that, it doesn't completely prove it, but it points some really strong evidence towards the idea that colleges are just indoctrination camps in leftism, or even in a lot of cases communism or socialism, in that both of those ideologies, and I would say even leftism, aren't really big supporters of free speech. So you look at the Democrats with high school or less, 55% say people need to be more careful, 60% when it comes to some college, and then college graduates 70%. So that's a pretty big difference in that. Like I say, these people were. If you're a Democrat in high school, you're probably a Democrat in college. Like, I don't see how much could change over 2 or 3 years. So, but the thing that has changed is the idea that you've spent time in college or university, and you're 15% more likely to basically be indoctrinated. So that's a very interesting point to take away there. But that's about it as far as this little study goes. I think it was pretty interesting to show that, number one, the majority of people agree with the right, I guess, and the problem nowadays is that the far left, who are generally the ones that are offended by everything, make their voices very loudly heard, and I think it skews people's minds. That I bet you if you ask the average person what the trend in this would be, that they would say that the average person, I'd say it'd be roughly the opposite, that about 60% of people say that people need to be more careful, and about 40 say that people are too easily offended. Personally, I wouldn't have said that before. I would say it's probably roughly what it is, but maybe slightly less. But it's actually the opposite. So, um, and I think that a lot of the brainwashing from the media and college and all this stuff skews this number. So if everybody was getting an unbiased view in society, that number would probably be closer to 70-30, and then maybe even 75-25. So first of all, if you're in the too many people are too easily offended nowadays group, you're in the majority, and I would say a pretty big majority, considering that all things being equal, this number would be bigger than it was. So stop. The big takeaway is that stop apologizing for your position when you're in a majority position. Like, that's something that the left thrives on, is that they'll take a position that they're in the minority, in a lot of cases the extreme minority, and they'll make you seem like you're the bad guy and you have the morally worse position, when the overwhelming majority of people disagree with them. It just makes no sense. So I'll leave it there. That's about all I wanted to talk about as far as this video goes. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more.